The demon world's king has been impeached and rendered jobless, while the heroic hero was captured following a failed expedition. However, fate brings them together on an unpredictable journey into the unknown, facing numerous dangers and twists. The story begins in the Demon King's castle, where Merlin Lucifer, the Lord of Pride, sleeps peacefully on his throne when his sister, Lilith, enters and becomes thrilled upon seeing him sleep. It was unusual for her to see her brother asleep, so she approached him closely to take advantage of the chance to kiss him. The church squad interrupted her as she was ready to kiss him by requesting that the Demon King appear and engage them in combat. Becoming irritated by their commotion, Lilith nevertheless went in for a kiss. But she was halted by a finger. Merlin awoke and asked what she was up to. She tried to bite his finger, but he quickly removed it and flicked her head. She was murmuring a bit more, and eventually she would have reached the lips. She was abruptly pulled toward Merlin as he grinned. He said that no one in the world could ever surprise him. While Lilith was relishing this moment, outside noises disturbed her tranquility. Then she took out a whip and swore that she would get rid of them, but she was stopped by Merlin, who urged her not to lose her cool over some tiny fries, as he decided to personally send them to the hereafter since they arrived searching for mischief on the last day of his reign. His smile became wider. Merlin and Lilith then went outside to see the intruders. On the battlefield, Merlin's minions were fighting against human soldiers and adventurers. Merlin then looked at a silver-haired woman and figured that she was the hero of this generation. She was easily defeating the monsters, but Merlin thought that she was weak. A giant worm appeared and attacked the soldiers, but Hero's Ice Lance destroyed the giant monster easily. She announced that she was the 233rd hero, Alice Claudia, and she'd defeat the Demon King. Next, we see a bishop enraged at the worthless peasants for impeding Alice's progress. His assistant tells him that the peasants were only cannon fodder, and that after all of them died, the church army would claim victory. But he is concerned about whether Alice can fight the Demon King. The bishop chuckled and remarked that it was alright since they still had their covert weapon in the skies, even if Alice did not defeat the Demon King. Alice discovers that the monsters have overpowered the vanguard squad and goes to their rescue. To everyone's amazement, a gigantic flying whale suddenly emerged in the sky as the bishop unexpectedly called forth the weapon that the church had been preparing for 100 years. Even Alice felt it was a terrifying beast. The bishop then gave the command for the whale to attack. This surprised Alice because this attack would destroy even the vanguard squad. Merlin heard the sound of the human soldiers shouting that they would not make it from the whale attack, but to everyone's surprise, Merlin stopped the attack. He announced he was the only person to decide who lives or dies. Bishop shouted that this was impossible. How could an attack even more powerful than the Holy Arcanery be blocked? His assistant said the Demon King was much more powerful than they had imagined, so they should retreat. But the bishop didn't listen and said that the white whale's body was made using all kinds of metals and had been blessed by the goddess. He then ordered the white whale to crush Lucifer with its body. Lucifer laughed and unsheathed his blade to attack the whale. As the whale attacked Lucifer, he cut it in half. This shocked the bishop and all the soldiers. Even Alice realized that the Demon King, Lucifer, was extremely powerful. Lucifer then looked at the soldiers and announced that he was the first Demon King and would grant them glorious deaths. Bishop then asked the hero to save them. She dashed toward Lucifer and challenged him to a duel, but Lucifer just smiled and attacked the soldiers. With just one slash, he killed all the remaining soldiers, the bishop, and his assistant. The final battle of Demon King Merlin's reign ended with only the unconscious hero remaining in the face of Lucifer's overwhelming attack. Merlin, the ruler of pride and the third owner of the first demon palace, possessed immense power at birth but also suffered from a curse that shortened his lifespan due to heartaches. However, he had a demon sword called Eden that increased its user's life force each time it was used to slay powerful enemies, which he hoped would eventually allow him to lift his curse by defeating the strongest person in the world. After killing the church soldiers, Merlin planned to leave the demon castle, but Lilith begged him not to go. Merlin explained that if he continued to stay in the castle, the curse on his heart would kill him, and he didn't want his sister to see that. Lilith suggested that Merlin kill her so his lifespan could be extended, but Merlin scolded her and said there was no way he could do that to his sister. Merlin expressed his love for his sister and promised to return to her once his curse was lifted. Lilith agreed to let him go but warned him about the danger of other women bewitching him. Before leaving, Merlin noticed Alice sleeping and decided to take her with him as a slave to help him in the outside world. He explained this to Lilith, who misunderstood it as a proposal and decided to complete her bridal training before Merlin returned. Meanwhile, Merlin carries Alice on his back as they journey towards the island's edge, hoping to find a way off it. We learn about Alice's past as she left the mountains where she lived, determined to vanquish the Demon King. However, she soon realized her goal was wishful thinking after witnessing Merlin's power. When they reach the island's edge, they find all the boats wrecked, stranding them. While Merlin goes to find a boat, Alice awakens to find a demon wolf ready to attack her. Merlin saves her and proclaims he will not let the wolf harm her. Alice feels something from Merlin as he protects her and chases the wolf away. When he approached Alice, she adopted a combat position. Alice believed Merlin had fallen in love with her beauty and desired to defile her. She charged at Merlin with all her might, but Merlin stopped her with just 2 fingers. He grasped her chin and told her that her body belonged to him. Alice, however, smacked his palm and vowed never to submit to such a wicked person. But Merlin chuckled in response, saying she had no choice but to surrender to him since he was her abductor. He threatened to treat her in an irrational and harsh manner once he possessed her body. Alice expected that Merlin would use her as a breeding place for his demon children. She tried to prevent him from touching her, but Merlin grabbed her and pushed her into a boat. Alice gripped the blade over her neck, warning Merlin not to approach too close or she would kill herself. Merlin examined the ore before stepping on it to strike Alice. He was wondering how a stupid girl like her could become a hero. Alice looked at him with teary eyes and told him to do things if he was horny, but he couldn't get violent with her. He then pointed towards the oars and said that they were going to cross the seas to enter the territory of Great Britain. Alice called him stupid and explained that even with a warship, it took a lot of time and people for them to reach this island. Also, there were a lot of sea creatures in the sea who would kill them instantly, so it was impossible for 2 of them to take turns rowing across the Strait of Akoni as they wouldn't make it out alive. Merlin laughed and said that she misunderstood something. He said that he had already told her that he was going to have her body do some unreasonable and inhumane things, so the only one rowing was her, and it was for himself. He would stand in front and enjoy the cool sea breeze. With a dumb look on her face, she shouted. 3 days later, Merlin stood at the front while Alice muttered why none of the sea creatures had attacked them yet. Merlin told her the reason, that a big one was following them. That's why the rest of the little sea monsters chose to keep their distance. Suddenly, the sea monster emerged from the bottom of their boat. Alice knew that the monster was called the Overlord of Orkney, and even though Merlin was strong, he wouldn't be able to defeat the Overlord. Merlin pointed toward the beast and said, "Wasn't the monster too ugly?" He laughed at the monster, saying that for such a thick neck, its head was way too small. This angered the beast as it dashed towards them, but Merlin cut it in half with a single strike. He then pulled on the cheeks of the shocked Alice and ordered her to keep rowing. He said that the monster's blood would lure the man-eating sharks. So, if she didn't want to become shark bait, she should move quickly. Alice concluded that Merlin was strong on land and even on the ocean. So, she could not allow him to arrive in a country of humans. She then asked him why he had left the demon palace. Merlin then thinks up an excuse and tells her the reason he left was that he was bored at the castle. Alice asked how he had grown so powerful. Merlin then told her about his past. His mother was the people's second ruler, also known as Lucifer II, but she was killed in combat during the church's 197th crusade, leaving him and his sister to rely on each other. So he resolved to grow strong to defend his sister. He defeated the old giant demon in the snowy mountains, fought the bull-headed sorcerer in the forest, and even fought the infernal demon to death. Ultimately, he slew the demon that was tormenting his sister and ascended to the position of Demon King. He then urges her to continue rowing. And he thought to himself that leaving the demon palace was the best action, as his heart felt more at ease after killing the monster. And he thought that when he was near the stupid hero, his heart calmed down. The story continues after Merlin and Alice have traveled for several days. They finally reach the land, but Merlin is not sure if this is the land of Great Britain. He questioned Alice about why he could not see any nearby villages. Using all of her power, Alice climbed out of the boat. She resented Merlin for making her spend the entire trip rowing the boat. She promised to exact her vengeance once she had acquired the secret technique of ice from her teacher. Merlin approached her and reminded her that she was his servant. After being tortured, Alice yelled that this was Great Britain, but they were not at the port. Merlin then said his goodbyes to her, and as he was walking away, an idea occurred to him. He believes that he would need money to exist in a country of humans, but he has not a penny. With a twinkle in his eyes, he shifted his gaze to Alice. He recalled feeling mithril armor on her chest while carrying her on his back, and if he could get his hands on that armor, he could sell it for a lot of money. He returns to Alice immediately and tells her that leaving her in such a way rips his heart so she can give him her most priceless possession. What does he want from her at this time? Alice asks. Then Merlin commands her to strip, and she begs him to be gentle with her because it's her first time. Merlin seized her armor, but he again made fun of her flat chest. He bid farewell to her and left after grabbing the armor. Alice had no choice but to curse him when she was alone in the wasteland. A year later, two thieves were camped in a tree on the outskirts of Wales, UK, looking for a target. One of the bandits told his superior that a guy was approaching, but he was dressed in tatters and appeared to have gone days without eating. His senior chuckled as he held a poster and stared at the man. When he tossed away the poster, he stated that looks might be misleading. Merlin, who hadn't eaten in days, was the man in question. The identical poster flew into his face. As Merlin looked over the ad, he saw that he was wanted for a few frantic dashes. He discovered that the human world was so painful that he couldn't even eat after wasting his money. The bandits suddenly stopped him, but he disregarded them and tried to flee. The robbers confronted him and threatened to take his possessions and go. But Merlin warned them to stay away from him, or he would kill them both. Then one of the thieves displayed his skill by tossing an apple into the air, and using his blade to peel it. The apple was about to fall, and Merlin, who hadn't eaten in days, was waiting for it to land so he could eat it. The bandit charged at Merlin, but Merlin caught the apple and killed him. The second bandit fled to save his life as soon as his comrade died. Suddenly, the bandit's lifeless body transformed into a goblin. Merlin discovered the goblins disguised themselves as robbers to deceive the Empire's army. Merlin didn't worry about it because it was not his concern, and he departed. Meanwhile, the other goblin arrived at His Majesty's hideout and requested an audience. Within the hideout, his boss questioned the goblin about the money. The goblin apologized for being unable to rob anybody. The goblin then informed his commander that a human had murdered Ragu-senpai. When the human killed Senpai, he hadn't even drawn his sword. His commander smiled and said the humans planned to launch a war with the goblins. Merlin entered a city bustling with activity. He paid his last 2 copper coins for the gate tariff and decided to look for a job. He remembered the past when he stole Alice's armor. He sold the armor and lived in a private manor. He even hired butlers, maids, and chefs from high-end restaurants to prepare all his meals. He even visited race courses and bet extravagantly, though he had never won. When he returned to his senses, he realized that he had spent all his money and even racked up a huge debt. As he became used to his lifestyle, he continued to visit high-end restaurants and dine and dash. Ultimately, he became a fugitive and started living on the run from his creditors. Now, his condition is so bad that the Demon King of the First Palace has turned into a busker. He was calling the people on the streets to come and watch his performance. He then used the sidestepping repetition skill to attract the audience. He could hear cheers from the crowd, as everyone thought he was a martial artist. After entertaining the crowd, he asked them for some money. But the crowd quickly looked away and dispersed. He then noticed a rich-looking child on the side. He quickly stops the child and says that the child has the bone structure of a kung fu genius. He asks for 2 copper coins from the child, and he will teach him a skill in return. The child introduced himself as Henry and told Merlin he had no money, but Merlin didn't listen. According to Merlin, the child looks rich and should have something. Merlin tried to scare the boy and asked for 2 copper coins if he wanted to live. Merlin then promised to teach him an invincible sword art if he could give him just 2 coins. When the boy heard about sword art, he got excited and asked what kind of sword art Merlin was talking about. Merlin confidently replied that it was a quick draw, but Henry made fun of the skill as even the regular disciples were uninterested in that skill. He then told Merlin to stop scamming people and find a job for himself. He then gave 2 candies to Merlin and said goodbye to him. Suddenly, Merlin noticed a bishop telling the story of his past. According to the bishop, Merlin killed an army of 100,000 people without leaving any trace. He then noticed a girl saying that even the 233rd hero died after being ravaged by the ugly demon lord. The bishop then showed the holy book to the crowd and told them that it would protect them from the demon lord, and they could have it for just 10 gold coins. The crowd quickly bought all the books from the bishop. This angered Merlin as they were scamming citizens, and the worst part was they were not giving him a cut after using his name like that. A bit later, Merlin was in a bar, asking the owner to hire him as a server. The owner could not resist the attractive Merlin and agreed. Then, the owner asked whether Merlin was a visitor from a nearby town. Indeed, Merlin responded, adding that he could only work for a maximum of 2 months before he had to start traveling again. He hasn't recovered from the heart curse, so he must find powerful foes to help him live longer. The owner then performed some math and told him that as a temporary employee, he would be paid 1 gold coin each month, including lodging and food. Merlin is surprised when she pays more than he anticipated. The owner then informed him that her pub is only available to ladies in the evening, so Merlin must use nice words and create personal ties with women to sell them beverages. This astonished Merlin, the demon king of the first palace, and it was then that he realized how far he had fallen in this other realm. He was now forced to sell beverages with his body. When the owner sensed Merlin's hesitation, she told him she would offer him more money if he quit. After all, the proud demon king opted to capitulate and take the task. Merlin eventually gets ready and begins training for the night. In the meantime, Alice is traveling to Scotland to board a gigolo. When she lost the armor a year ago, she was left with a huge debt that she paid to settle. Alice was only able to register as an adventurer. While she is still deeply in debt, she is unlike Merlin because she can afford housing and 1 or 2 dresses. And as soon as she discovered this gigolo mission, she accepted the task with a reward of 5,000 gold coins. She was delighted since it was simple to catch a gigolo, but she still needed to locate him because his face had been damaged on the poster. Meanwhile, Merlin was so good at selling drinks to the ladies in the pub. Suddenly, Henry enters the pub and says he is back. Henry was shocked to see that useless man from before working at his mom's pub. Henry asked his mom how she could hire a useless guy like him. Even though Merlin is angry with the child's behavior, he keeps his smile as he can't be rude to the owner's child. Henry shouted at her mom and told her to stop hiring unknown people, so the others kept bad-mouthing her. Merlin noticed Henry's dirty clothes and probably fought with the kids who bad-mouthed his mother. Merlin then put the sword on the table and said that he needed to be stronger if he wanted to get those people to shut up. But Henry insulted Merlin's skill again and ran from there. The next day, Merlin was listening to a conversation between some adventurers. One of the members said to his partner that his share would be 2,000 gold coins in this mission. His partner asked with a shocked look why he was giving him a larger share. The man then looked at their other member, and they both announced that they were getting married after this mission. Merlin looked at them and knew that this was a death mission. Merlin then asked the group about this mission they were going on. One member said the quest was to kill 100 goblins and cut their left ears. Merlin thought that the group would be fine if this were just a goblin hunt. At night, the group was fighting the goblins and had already killed 63 goblins. They need 37 more, and then they will immediately retreat. After that, suddenly, a goblin jumped down from the cliff and instantly killed the group's leader. A small goblin was sitting on the shoulder of the big one, who introduced himself as Prime Minister Jeju, a high-ranking goblin magician. The fact that a powerful goblin was in such a location astounded the adventurer. Jeju then attacked the man with a fire spell. The girl boosted his defense with magic, but as soon as the boy defended the magic attack, he got attacked by the big goblin. Jeju then ordered the goblins to capture the woman. The man asked the goblins to leave his lover alone. So, Jeju then offered him a deal. So, the fate of this couple hangs in the balance. What do you think the deal is? Will the couple be able to survive the goblin assault? The story continues as Alice reaches the best inn to stay in the town. She opens the door and is surprised at how lively the inn is. The owner, Martha, welcomes her, and she introduces herself as an adventurer. After she asks to book a room, she is shown to her room. Martha also mentions that their top performer will be dancing that night and invites Alice to come down and watch if she is interested. Alice, however, is not interested in the performance and goes straight to her room. However, before she enters her room, she shows Martha a poster of a wanted man and asks if she recognizes the person in the poster, but the person's face is torn. She replies that she isn't sure and she leaves. At the same time, Merlin comes out of his room and says he feels like he heard that silly hero's voice, or it is probably his imagination. Inside her room, Alice lays down on the bed, tired after a stressful journey, and reminisces about the time when pirates captured her. At that time, she was saved by an unknown swordsman who defeated the pirates who had a fleet of 17 warships. Alice fell in love with the swordsman even though she had not seen his face and believed he was generous and easygoing. She then remembers that she needs to write a letter to her master. In the letter, she tells him she is doing well and is so rich that she doesn't need to worry about money. She also mentions that she has gotten into a relationship with the legendary swordsman of Elgin. Alice then prays to God that she never has to re-encounter Merlin and for God to punish him. At that very moment, Merlin sneezes and becomes confused. He habitually sneezes around the same time every day since someone could be cursing him. After a while, Alice comes downstairs to get a drink and overhears some women shouting for someone named Little Daisy. She thinks, who is Little Daisy, that the women are screaming for that she can even hear their voices from upstairs. Meanwhile, Henry, also in the inn, becomes angry and calls the women hoes. Alice explains that the term hoe is too harsh and asks Henry to look at how well dressed they are. However, Henry insists all the women are married and have come to the inn for a good time. He says it is because his mom is running that sort of business is why people are saying all kinds of things about her. And Alice gets the idea that he is the owner's son. But he then compliments Alice, saying she is different because she is pure and simple. Then, Henry notices the gold plate on Alice's waist and asks her if she is a gold-plate adventurer. And she replies yes. He asks her to teach him a sword skill, as he wants to learn one, but Alice explains that her skills are impossible to learn without proper inheritance. Instead, she pats him on his head, advises him to drink milk to strengthen his body, and promises to teach him later. Henry gets happy and starts to drink his milk. He praises her for being more insightful and better than a useless Merlin who only knows how to use the quick draw technique to scam others. Just then, Alice hears some women shouting that Little Daisy has appeared. Henry tells Alice that Little Daisy is a useless young man who only knows how to do quick draw skill. Despite his uselessness, Henry says Daisy is a complete chick magnet, and the perfect example of a gigolo. When Alice hears Henry call him a gigolo, she unsheathes her sword and goes to capture Daisy. On stage, she approaches Merlin and says he must be the gigolo from Scotland and is wanted for debt avoidance. She tells him to come with and should not put on any resistance. Realizing what he's done, Alice angrily attacks Merlin, but he easily dodges the attacks and asks her to stop since they've known each other for a long time. He removes his mask and says, "It's me, Alice." In a second, Alice's pain and anger over what he's done to her leave, and she becomes dumbfounded. Merlin asks if she's forgotten all those lovely nights they spent together rowing the boat. Alice, still angry, says that because of him, she has to live in shame and attacks him again. But Merlin grabs her and says that killing him for only robbing is a little too far. Unable to do anything, Alice starts crying and tells him how much she's suffered because of him. Merlin then hears other women calling him a scumbag for doing bad things, and even Henry looks at him in disgust and asks what he's done to Alice. Henry points towards Alice and tells Merlin he should be grateful that Alice likes him, but how dare he take advantage of her love. Merlin thinks that if they're going to misunderstand like this, he won't be able to work there anymore. So, to prevent that, he quickly hugs Alice and asks her to calm down, as he'll buy her a drink. After a while, all the customers leave, and Alice and Merlin sit beside each other. Alice is happy because the iced milk in the pub is so good. Merlin insults her again, but Alice says she has a boyfriend, Elgin's master swordsman, who will cut him in half. Meanwhile, the owner, Martha, thinks that Merlin is popular with girls, as a high-ranked adventurer is his girlfriend. Martha then says that she'll put Henry to sleep so they can take their time chatting. Alice asks Merlin to return her armor, and she'll call it quits. But Merlin nervously says sorry and tells her he's already sold the armor and used the money to bet on the ponies at the royal racetrack. Alice is shocked as the armor is worth tens of millions of gold coins, but Merlin has spent it so quickly. She grabs Merlin and angrily tells him that until he returns her armor, it's not over between them. But Merlin says she knows who he is, and the moment he snatched it from her, the armor became his. Merlin says that the only thing he can offer in return for the armor is his life. But they're not enemies, as he's no longer the Demon King. However, if she insists on taking his life, that won't be true anymore. Alice freezes in front of Merlin's murderous aura, but Merlin tells her to relax as he won't cause any trouble in Martha's shop. Alice asks why he isn't stealing the armor if he's strong. Merlin replies that, unlike humans, a contract is a sacred agreement to demons, so he will not break it. Alice replies that he just said he is no longer a Demon King, so why is he hung up on something like this? But Merlin says that even though he is no longer a Demon King, he is still Pride's previous ruler, so he won't do it. Alice then tells him she is no longer a hero, as the armor is the church's property, and she needs to pay them for it. To do that, she needs to accept S-rank missions that pay 10,000 gold coins for a single mission. But they are too dangerous to complete. Merlin mutters that the reward for one mission is several tens of thousands of gold coins and asks Alice if that is true. Alice says yes, as S-rank missions are fraught with danger. Merlin smiles and thinks that he has finally found his next job. He concludes that it is a perfect job for him as he will be killing Saint-rank enemies to extend his lifespan and earn a lot of gold coins in the process. He then asks Alice what it takes to become an adventurer. Alice replies that anyone with aura or mana can become one, and an active adventurer's referral works too, as Merlin doesn't have an aura or mana. He begs Alice to refer him, but Alice quickly refuses and says she will never refer a scumbag like him. So that night, they parted on bad terms. A few days later, Martha asks Merlin if he has seen Henry. She tells him that she hasn't seen him since the morning and is going outside to look for him. Meanwhile, later that night, the same adventurer who made a deal with the goblins reaches the gate and asks the guards to open it. One of the guards opens the gate to help the adventurer, who cries and apologizes to him. The guards then notice an army of goblins. The Prime Minister of Goblins then orders them to kill all the men in the town and steal all their women. The goblins then enter the village and start killing the men. The adventurer then asks the Prime Minister to release his lover, as he has done what they told him. But the goblin laughs and kills the man with a fire spell. Everyone inside the village hears the alarm, but the goblins come and start killing them. Meanwhile, Alice notices the people running to save their lives. An old man tells her to run but gets killed before Alice. Alice then kills the goblin with ice magic. She then challenges the goblins to come and attack her. The goblins attack her, but she kills them easily using ice magic. She then creates ice wings and flies into the sky, where she starts to rain down the ice magic, killing goblins. At the same time, inside the pub, Merlin is chatting with the beautiful ladies around him when he soundly hears some voice shouting "Run!" and they are here. He tells them he wants to check something outside, but suddenly, the goblins destroy the pub's door and enter to kidnap the women. The women next to Merlin become frightened by this, and Merlin wonders what the goblins are doing in the town. The story continues as the goblins barge into the pub where Merlin is to kidnap the ladies. In another part of the town, Martha is searching for Henry, but at the same time, Henry, who is playing with the other kids, notices that the city is being attacked. He is surprised by what is happening, and then he hears his mother calling his name. He looks down and sees his mom getting kidnapped by the goblins. He tries to save her, but the other kids stop him from going outside, saying he will be killed if he goes after the goblins. In the pub, Merlin kills the goblins with a stool, saying they shouldn't have come when he had guests to entertain. He then noticed the army of goblins charging at him, but he killed all the goblins with a single strike of his sword. Soon, a goblin informed the Prime Minister, Jeju, that their western forces had been annihilated. Jeju shockingly asked if there was a high ranker, but the goblin said he couldn't even sense mana or aura from him, and the person looked like an ordinary human but handsome with blonde hair and red eyes. However, Jeju tells him there is no way an ordinary person can wipe out their forces in the west, and something is amiss. However, the goblin stated that he witnessed him and that, without unsheathing his sword, the man wiped out their army. The goblin continued, even the soldiers posted on Main Street were wiped out with ice, and the silver-haired magic swordswoman who did it is now moving toward them. Jeju then ordered troops to retreat to replenish their numbers with the human females they kidnapped. Soon, Alice noticed that the goblins were retreating with some of the female hostages, and the rain would wash away their trails, so she ran after them. But before she could save some of the women, she got attacked by a large goblin. She fought an intense battle with the goblin and was able to kill it by sealing it in ice and shattering it. But the goblin's army got away. After the battle ended and the goblins retreated, the village chief called for everyone to assemble. He said that many people had been captured and taken away to the mountains, so they all needed to go and save them. But the townspeople feared the goblins and suggested forgetting about the kidnapped women. Henry shouted at the people and said that his mom and the others must be waiting, so they must rescue them, and they would all go to hell if they didn't. Suddenly, the people heard the pastor's voice, who said that they wouldn't descend to hell. The village chief then asks the pastor if he has a solution to their problem. The people bowed before the pastor and asked him to save their family. The pastor assures them that he will relieve them of their sins in the goddess's name and shows them the holy book. He says their sins will be forgiven if they buy the book for 100 gold coins. He easily fooled the people, but suddenly they heard Alice's voice. She announces she is a gold-plate adventurer and the Vatican's 233rd hero, Alice Claudia. But the pastor insulted Alice and called her a disgrace to the church. Alice unsheathed her sword and told him to pray to the goddess if he believed she would answer his prayers. The pastor quickly fell to the ground and apologized for fooling people. Alice gave a speech and motivated the villagers to attack the goblin's hideout. Alice then asks the village chief to tell her the location of the goblin nest, to which he agrees. But he informs her that the goblin emperor is a saint-ranked being. However, she tells him not to worry. Meanwhile, inside the pub, Merlin tries to calm the ladies while telling them they are safe as long as they are by his side. Suddenly, Henry enters the pub, and Merlin asks him where he is and what about his mother, but Henry ignores him and runs to his room. He picked up his father's sword. He tells Merlin it is not his business and says he will save his mom. Merlin realized that the goblins had kidnapped Martha and tried to calm Henry down. But Henry shouted that he would protect his mom and ran from there. Merlin then told the ladies to wait at the pub while he went outside and took care of everything. At the same time, Alice notices an injured adventurer outside the village. She tells the adventurer that the villagers are coming and he will be saved. When the adventurer realized she was the gold-plate adventurer Alice, he asked her to save his fiancée. He tells her what happened with the goblins and his deal with them to save his fiancée, saying he had no choice. Alice then takes his adventurer badge and promises that his fiancée will return it to him, and she leaves. As she leaves, he informs her that the Goblin Emperor is a saint-ranked individual, so she has to be careful. However, on her way, Alice thinks she is a match for a saint-ranked being and remembers Merlin's words about the untalented knowing their place. But she is determined to challenge her limits. And even in the face of despair, she must believe in herself. Inside the Goblin's palace, the Emperor was happy with the Prime Minister as he had captured the beautiful ladies. He told him to throw them into the dungeon again, as he would enjoy the women after bathing. Jeju then ordered the other goblins to be ready for an ambush, as he knew that the humans would come to save their family. Suddenly, the goblins noticed something in white approaching. But before they could do anything, they were killed by Alice's ice attacks. Only Jeju is left at the entrance, so he attacks Alice with fire magic, but she quickly dodges the attack and kicks him into a wall, knocking him unconscious. She then enters the cave but is ambushed by two big goblins, which she kills with ice magic. Later, all the villagers also reach the goblins' lair and angrily dash toward the goblins. As the villagers attacked the goblins, the Prime Minister's subordinates had to report the situation to him. But he was just recovering after being knocked unconscious by Alice's attack. When he hears about the villagers' attack, he gets angry. Jeju gets up and creates a firewall using the earth fire spirit to stop the humans from attacking. As the villagers are running away from the fire, Merlin arrives there. Surprised by the firewall technique, Merlin then asks one of the villagers if he has seen Henry from the Moonlight Pub. But the man says he has not seen him since little kids weren't allowed in the mountains. Frustrated by Henry's behavior, Merlin gets close to the firewall, and the village chief tells him that there is a saint-ranked being in the cave and that they should leave the Goblin Emperor to the silver-haired magic swordswoman. Merlin smiled and said that she was someone who had already lost to him. The village chief and others are surprised by what he says, and Merlin doesn't bother to explain. He then opens a path for himself in the firewall without even unsheathing his sword, and this shocks the villages. As Merlin leaves, the village chief says that he seems to have seen Merlin before, and the atmosphere around him is the same as that of the master swordsman who vanquished the pirates at Port Elgin half a year ago. The village chief then compares the Elgin swordsman and Merlin's little Daisy Gigolo character, and concludes they are the same person. Later inside the cave, the Prime Minister, Jeju tells his subordinates that the villagers will not be able to break through the wall of fire, so they should prioritize catching the silver-haired magic swordswoman and bringing her to him. But one of his subordinates asks whether high-class goods like hers should be offered to the Goblin Emperor. Jeju scolds him. As they are talking, Merlin enters the cave, and Jeju is shocked that Merlin can enter the cave. He asks Merlin who he is, and Merlin introduces himself as Little Daisy. Seeing that Merlin doesn't look powerful as he has no mana or aura, Jeju attacks him with a fireball. But the attack doesn't even scratch Merlin. Jeju is surprised that Merlin could disperse the attack easily and thinks Merlin is using a trick. He then attacks Merlin again with a flaming tornado using a fire and wind spirit, but Merlin easily blocks it. Merlin then says he thought Jeju was strong since he looks like a mutated goblin but is weak. However, Jeju is frustrated that his attack is not having any effect and uses his ultimate attack, the Spear of Doom. But Merlin easily catches it and breaks it while mocking him. Then, Merlin dashed toward Jeju and killed him in an instant. Before Jeju dies, he asks Merlin why he didn't use his sword to kill him. Merlin says he won't draw his blade for a weakling like him. After Jeju dies, Merlin walks deeper into the cave, saying that in addition to being invisible in close quarters combat, he is also immune to magic, so finding a worthy opponent is difficult. Then he enters the cave for his main purpose. The story continues as Alice reaches the cave. After knocking out the goblin guarding the cells, she frees the ladies from the cell. All of them are surprised to see Alice, and Martha asks about Henry. Alice says Henry is fine and waiting for her in the village, not knowing he is also in the cave. Alice tells them they should leave before someone comes, and as they leave, Alice asks them if they know anyone named Cecil. One of the ladies answers that she is Cecil and, as Alice wants, tells her that her fiancé, Tron, is waiting for her. Suddenly, the Goblin Emperor appeared behind Alice and attacked her, smashing her into a wall. He then tries to capture the women, saying he will skin them if he catches them. But Alice suddenly seals the Goblin Emperor inside a magical ice barrier. But the Emperor laughed and easily destroyed it. So the battle between the Goblin Emperor and Alice began. Alice uses another ice chain to trap the Goblin Emperor, and while he is trapped, she throws Tron's adventurer's badge to Cecil, and tells her that he is still alive and is waiting for her. Seeing that Alice is willing to risk her life to save the village ladies, the Goblin Emperor tells her he will be merciful and give her two choices. He tells her she should drop her sword and becomes his consort, or she should fight with him to the end. However, Alice says she would rather die, and the Goblin Emperor tells her he will discipline her after he catches her. Suddenly, Alice starts to gather her ice energy to unleash an attack. At the same time, Henry, who had entered the cave, encountered a large goblin. The goblin was about to kill Henry, but Merlin arrived on time and killed the goblin easily. This shocked Henry, as Merlin killed the goblin with just one move. Henry then realized that Merlin was too powerful and he was wrong about Merlin not being strong. Henry quickly grabbed Merlin's leg and begged him to teach him the quick draw he mentioned before. But Merlin declined, and as the two argued, they heard Martha's voice. Henry tells Martha that Merlin is too strong, as he killed this goblin with a single strike. Martha then asks Merlin to go and help Alice, as she is fighting the Goblin Emperor alone. But she is afraid as Alice isn't the Goblin Emperor's opponent. Merlin tried to refuse it initially, but when Martha promised to pay 3 times the salary, he quickly agreed. Merlin then told them to go outside and leave to save Alice. Meanwhile, Alice was caught by the Emperor and was crying in pain. She smiled as she trapped the Emperor in her trap using a divine ice punishment technique. Then, the icicle blade started falling from the sky, and while the Emperor was trying to protect himself, she pierced his heart. But to her surprise, the Goblin Emperor healed himself and revealed that a goblin's heart was on the right side, not the left. He then tells her he won't show mercy anymore. The Goblin Emperor then attacks Alice, but she tries to block it with an ice wall. However, it crumbles, and she smashes into the wall. She starts to bleed, and the Goblin Emperor picks her up and says she will be his captive forever. Suddenly he senses something, and the next second, his hand is cut off by Merlin, who is now carrying Alice. Seeing her almost blacked out, he is surprised that she staked everything for people she had nothing to do with. Merlin puts her down in a corner, and Alice looks at Merlin with blurry eyes and thinks Elgin's master swordsman has come to save her again. As Merlin approaches the Goblin Emperor, Alice, in her almost blacked out state, tells him she likes him, which makes him surprised. Merlin asks what she is saying, but he is interrupted by the Goblin Emperor, who asks him if he is ready. The emperor laughed as he withdrew his hand. He continuously attacked Merlin, but Merlin easily dodged the attacks. The emperor then offered Merlin the position of prime minister and asked him to join him. Merlin laughed at him and insulted the emperor. This angered the emperor, and he dashed toward Merlin, attacking him with full power, but Merlin easily dodged the attack. Merlin then attacked the emperor and cut him with a single slash. Merlin was happy because his curse would be alleviated for a while. He then noticed the goblin's treasure but also noticed that the dungeon was falling. With no other choice left, he left the treasure behind and saved Alice. The people outside noticed a part of the dungeon collapsing, but Merlin appeared with Alice in his hands from the middle of the dust. The next day, Alice woke up and found herself in bed. Martha entered the room and told Alice Merlin had saved her life last night. After a while, Merlin came to meet Alice. Alice then thanked Merlin for saving her life. Merlin replied that he would not accept a simple thank you. He wanted her to make a referral for him as payment. However, Alice refused and said she would not do anything for him. Merlin threatened her, saying that if she did not help him, he would tell the people that the 233rd hero was an ungrateful bastard. Not wanting to hear bad rumors about herself, Alice agreed to help him. Meanwhile, a black-haired woman searched for something near the fallen goblin dungeon. After looking for a while, she picked up the goblin emperor's weapon. She used magic on the weapon and found a key hidden inside it. She says she has had a lot of trouble finding the key, yet it was easy to get hold of it. The woman laughed as she acquired the third key of the Hell's Core. Suddenly, a dark portal opens, and a voice calls her name, Kaltsona. The voice asks her if she has obtained the key, and she replies yes. Then the voice says that it seems like the rumor about the key being in the Saugus branch was true, and it is no wonder they didn't migrate to the south and join the kingdom as they were protecting the key. The voice tells her that their plan to revive the previous realm has been on the agenda, and as long as they obtain the power of the Hell's Core, overturning Great Britain will be easy. Kaltsona later replies that she would offer her soul to revive the realm. In the next scene, Merlin and Allison say goodbye to the villagers and leave in a cart. Some of the ladies in the village are sad to see Merlin leave. And as Merlin leaves, he tells Henry to take care of his mother. Henry says he will do that, and when he has an aura, he will travel to Wrexham to find him. Later, Merlin and Alice argue or roast each other during the never-boring trip to Wrexham. Finally, after a week, they reach their destination, Wrexham. After reaching Wrexham, Merlin and Alice quickly went to the Adventurers Guild to complete their business. As they entered, they noticed an armored man taking the adventurer test, and he was ranked at the Saint rank, which surprised everyone in the building. When Merlin sees this, he asks Alice if the Saint's rank is on the same level as the Goblin Emperor's. She replies that there are differences within the Saint rank, and only 3 Saint ranks were in the guild, including the old guild master. However, she says she is surprised that she will meet one again. But Merlin replies that the number of Saint rank they had was so little as he had a lot of Saint rank subordinates when he was the Demon King, and her guild was wretched. The guild's receptionist, Luja, then welcomes Alice. Luja is surprised that Alice brought a man to the guild and thinks he is her boyfriend. Still, Alice explains to her that they were not in that kind of relationship, and she tells her that he needed her referral due to some special circumstances. Alice explained Merlin's situation to Luja that he is a fugitive, so he wants to become an adventurer. Luja understood and told Merlin that if he became an adventurer, his bounty would be revoked, and he could repay his debt by completing missions. She then asked him to take a test to verify his strength and told him the higher the rank, the more benefits there would be. But Merlin says there is no meaning in being an adventurer if he cannot take the highest ranked mission. However, she tells him that even though his initial rank may be low, and he is not strong enough, he can still make up for it with experience and advance in rank. After she explains the importance of strength to him, she tells him that to take the test, he should put his hands on a crystal ball, which will glow different colors based on his strength. Merlin put his hand on the crystal ball with full confidence. Even the other adventurers got nervous, but everyone was shocked as Merlin had no strength. According to the crystal, everyone starts to make fun of Merlin because of his results, and Alice tells him to stop fooling around. But Merlin explains that he doesn't have mana. He just uses his quick draw technique to defeat enemies. Alice is surprised that Merlin has no mana, as she has seen him defeat strong opponents with his sword technique. Seeing that Merlin cannot prove his strength, Alice asks Luja if she can vouch for him since he is very qualified to be an adventurer. But Luja tells her that the rules won't allow him, since he cannot prove his strength. Merlin then asks Luja to arrange a fight for him with their strongest adventurer. If he wins, then he can become an adventurer. Luja tells him not to make a joke like that, and Merlin tells her seriously that he wasn't joking and he will take all of them on if they want to come together at once. Suddenly, an old man comes behind and says he will test Merlin's strength. The elderly man is Taylor, the guild master of Wrexham. He then instructs the others not to follow them inside the training hall and instructs Merlin to go with him. Taylor instructs Merlin to use all of his strength to assault him in the training room and warns that if he even moves 1 inch, it will be his loss. As he sprints toward Guild Master Taylor, Merlin chuckles. Taylor is unable even to avoid Merlin's overpowering speed and strength. But before Merlin's sword can hit the old man, he stops. The force of the slash nevertheless destroys half of the city, and the power shocks Taylor. Merlin reassures Guildmaster Taylor that he has just used the back of his blade as the Guildmaster falls to the ground, and he explains that Taylor would be dead if he used the other side. This makes Taylor wonder who Merlin is. After a while, Alice and Merlin leave the Adventurers Guild. Luja asks the old man why he used his full strength on a normal person because now they need to pay for the damages. Seeing that, just a slash from the back of Merlin's sword cuts the road in half without hurting anyone outside. However, Taylor tells them not to say anything about the matter again. Merlin is happy that he finally becomes an iron-plate adventurer. Alice and Merlin still roast each other and leave, but Merlin has always spent all his savings on the racecourse. At night, Merlin tries to sell Matchbox to earn money to live and eat. After thinking for a while, Merlin stands up and decides to freeload a meal from Alice. Meanwhile, Alice is enjoying a bath and praying for that bastard Merlin to sleep on the street like a beggar. She adds that no one heeds the matches he's selling, so he's beset by hunger and cold. Suddenly, Alice hears her doorbell ringing. She opens the door, thinking that it is her landlady, but it is Merlin who offers to spend a night with her. However, as Alice is hostile towards Merlin, his honey trap doesn't work on her, and she throws him with a kick. She then hears the doorbell again. This time, her landlady tells her not to use weapons in the house. She notices Alice and Merlin fighting with each other, so she tells Alice to treat her husband well. Merlin quickly gets into the role of Alice's husband and looks at her with teary eyes. Alice angrily tries to attack Merlin, but she is stopped by the landlady, who tells her that if she doesn't stop, she will have to leave her house. With no other choice left, Alice goes inside the landlady's place and tells Merlin to take care of her as she had suffered a lot to find this place. She gives Merlin an extra key to enter again if Alice throws him out. After a while, Alice shouts at Merlin, who is trying to enter her house forcefully, but Merlin tells her to calm down as he has a great offer for her. He suggests renting the house together, and by doing that, they both could save a lot of money. After thinking for a while, Alice agrees to his offer and asks for the rent. However, the only thing Merlin has is the racecourse tickets. The next day, Merlin is angry at the horse, as he has lost all his money in the race. At the same time, a man named Arnold tries to impress Alice, but she is not interested in him. However, an adventurer tells Arnold that Alice has already found someone and points toward Merlin. This shocks Arnold, and he angrily challenges Merlin to a duel. He shows an AE-ranked mission to Merlin and says that whoever completes this mission first will be the right partner for Alice. Luja explains to Alice that some robbers have snuck into an underground palace and activated a trap. Now that the undead is appearing and attacking villages, they have started to recruit. Arnold then tells Alice that a Saint-rank adventurer named Claude is also joining him, so he asks Alice to team up with them. Alice agrees, and they quickly stamp the contract. Merlin also wants to go, but Luja tells him he must get 2 more teammates first. Merlin quickly selects the drunk adventurer from the 4, and the guild master Taylor allows them to go with just 2 members. Merlin is thinking about how to get a carriage when the drunk man arranges it for him. But the next morning, when the man comes to his senses, he asks Merlin to return, as the mission is too dangerous. Merlin tries to comfort him, but the man thinks Merlin is stupid because he is an iron-plate adventurer. Suddenly they hear someone approaching them, and a knight comes close and asks if they know the fastest way to Denbighshire. The adventurer tells the knight there is a way, but the path is a bit narrow, so they need to walk for a while, as their carriage is too big for the path. This angers the knight, so he tries to hit him with a whip, but Merlin stops the whip and throws him down. He tells the knight to mind his manners, as not only is he not grateful, but he is also showing them his attitude. The adventurer tries to stop Merlin as the knights are from Duke Rose, the most powerful person in Wales. The knight gets up and challenges Merlin to a duel, but a voice stops him. A beautiful woman named Cecilia comes out of the carriage and scolds the knight, Kyle, for challenging a weakling. She says they should not stop when just two ants are blocking their way. Cecilia apologizes for her knight's behavior, but Merlin disrespects her and tells her to show her chest while apologizing. This angers the knight, but he is again stopped by Cecilia, who says that they should not waste time on a weakling. With no other choice left, the knight and Cecilia leave. Meanwhile, Arnold tries to impress Alice and remembers when he first met her. One day, he is visiting Elgin City to meet his uncle when he notices a silver-haired girl defeating a giant boar. When he sees her heroic moves, he falls in love with her. To win Alice's heart, he quits his life as a noble and becomes an adventurer. He then talks about Elgin's master swordsman. Claude interrupts Arnold and asks him about this swordsman. Arnold explains that Elgin's master swordsman defeated two Saint-rank pirates with a single move, but Claude replies that defeating two Saint-rank pirates is not a big deal, and that even in the Saint rank, there are strong and weak ones. Claude then angrily says that this era is not good as there are fewer real experts, and the royals are incompetent. Arnold asks, if Elgin's master swordsman can't be called a hero, then who in Great Britain can be called a hero? Claude then asks him if he has heard about the four heroes from the previous realm. The dragon-taming robber Kalsona, the twin sword masters Zoe and Joey, and the last one, the Tempest warrior Bernard, who's the war machine on the battlefield, who even fought with the dragon in a one-on-one fight, and who is also the leader of the four heroes. The butler then tells them to rest, as they have traveled for a long time. While going out, Alice says to Claude that the four heroes have died, so they should not compare the deceased with the people now. Alice is sitting alone and thinking about Merlin and whether the guild allows him to participate or not. Suddenly, Arnold appears behind Alice and tries to impress her again. Frustrated, Alice gets up and says she will look for Claude. She enters the forest and hears a voice saying, "I am offering my soul to revive the previous realm." Suddenly, Claude appears and is about to kill Alice but stops at the last second. He apologizes and says that he thought she was a robber or something. Alice then says she came to inform him that they are setting out. Before leaving, Claude asks if she has heard something, but she quickly denies it. She thinks that Claude is suspicious, and what does he mean by reviving the previous realm? Meanwhile, Cecilia meets Arnold and asks what he is doing here. Arnold explains that he is also here to deal with the undead like her and has a saint-rank adventurer with him. Suddenly, the butler shouts and asks Arnold to look ahead. A herd of flaming rhinos is running toward them at full speed. Kyle quickly orders the other knights to take positions and protect Lady Cecilia at all costs. Cecilia then casts the Holy Light Arbitration on the knights. The knights are positioned to attack the rhinos, but Claude jumps in front of them. Kyle tells Claude not to stand in front as they should gather together to withstand the attack, but Claude replies that he will not do something like that, and he kills the herd with a single strike. Arnold then introduces Claude to everyone, but Cecilia tries to buy Claude. She promises to double his payment if he joins her, but Claude refuses her request and leaves. Cecilia thinks that Claude is strange, and she also senses faint dark magic from him. She orders Kyle to speed up and says they will try to reach Derbyshire before midnight. She says that the matter of the undead is her trial, and she must solve it herself, so her father will see her in a new light. Later at night, in the Denbighshire Standing Army camp, the soldiers are having a feast and say they will kill all the skeletons tomorrow. Claude tells Alice to go and enjoy herself, as he is going to have some rest. Alice thinks that if Claude is a major criminal, it is dangerous to team up with him. As Alice goes ahead, she gets shocked and falls. She thinks Merlin is already here when he sets out later than her. Merlin is enjoying a sweet time with some beautiful ladies and is bragging about his quick draw technique. But Alice goes close to them and sends the girls away as she wants to talk to Merlin. She asks Merlin how he managed to arrive here faster than her. Merlin replies that it's all thanks to Hobbs, who took a shortcut with her donkey. Alice angrily shouts at Merlin for using her cute donkey without her permission. Merlin also tells her that when he whipped its butt, the donkey ran faster than the horse. Hobbs then makes fun of Alice's flat chest and gets punched by her. She then asks him if he knows anything about the Denbishers matter, and Hobbs gives her the information in exchange for some coins. He says there is a tomb of the Prime Minister from the previous realm, and this Prime Minister was a necromancer, so he probably summoned those skeletons and undead. Meanwhile, inside one of the tents, Claude thinks that everything he is about to do is for the sake of the previous realm. The story continues as Alice notices Claude heading somewhere later at night and decides to follow him. Hobbs, while drunk, also sees Alice following Claude but thinks it's his imagination. She then notices Claude entering the underground maze all alone. In the morning, Arnold sees Merlin sleeping with someone and pulls the blanket, thinking it's Alice. Merlin wakes up with a body pillow and tells Arnold that the blanket is a part of him, so there won't be a next time for Arnold if he does it again because he will send him to hell. But Arnold tells Merlin that Alice and Claude are missing from the tent, and he can't find them anywhere. Hobbs says he noticed Alice going to the tomb at night. Merlin thinks Alice is after the high reward, so he quickly changes his mind and decides to go to the tomb. Hobbs tries to stop Merlin, but he doesn't listen and says that the enemy this time is undead, so he can't use them to extend his life, so he must get the high rewards. After saying that, Merlin leaves. Meanwhile, Alice secretly follows Claude inside the underground maze and is confused because although it's his first time, Claude isn't getting lost. As Alice walks, she notices some battle scars, and she observes that someone has already gone through there. Later, Claude arrives at a gate guarded by some skeletons. The skeletons attack Claude, but he quickly defeats them and goes inside. Inside the room, a high-level skeleton sits on a throne and asks Claude who he is. Claude greets the skeleton by saying, "It's been 400 years, Sir Ian," but Ian doesn't know him. Claude then puts his sword down and asks if he doesn't remember the Empire's Tempest Warrior. Ian quickly stands up and says that Bernal died a long time ago. Claude then explains that the prince revived the 4 heroes with dark magic and is functioning as the undead. Ian asks if the prince is still alive and, if so, what he is planning this time. Claude says they need stronger power to revive the previous realm and asks Ian to hand over the key he's protecting. Ian angrily says that if the previous king hadn't made a contract with Satan, none of this would have happened. But Claude replies that to acquire power, there's a need to make sacrifices and asks for the key again. However, Ian refuses to give him the key, and they prepare to attack each other. Unknown to them, Alice is still hiding and watching their intense battle. Meanwhile, Merlin is lost inside the maze and is worried that someone else might take the high reward if he wastes time. He then remembers Hobbs' words that the maze has several layers. So, to save time, he destroys the floors to go down fast. At the same time, on the second layer of the maze, Cecilia and her knights are fighting with the skeletons. Kyle says they could die, but Cecilia stops him and says they'll escape the maze. Suddenly, a skeleton scares Cecilia, and she falls to the ground and loses her staff. As soon as the holy light disappears, the skeleton starts approaching the knights. Kyle kills the skeleton attacking Cecilia, and she runs to pick up her staff. But a high-level skeleton appears and attacks Cecilia, but Kyle saves her. The skeleton kills all the other knights, and now only Kyle and Cecilia remain. Kyle asks her to run away, but Cecilia refuses to leave him behind. Kyle then attacks with full force and manages to injure the skeleton, but the skeleton pierces him with the spear. The skeleton then throws Kyle on the ground and goes close to kill Cecilia, and as it is about to kill her, the roof is destroyed, and Merlin comes down from the hole. Merlin looks at Cecilia and asks what the daughter of Rose's family is doing down there. Cecilia explains that she wants to prove her powers to her father, so she comes down with her knights but gets assaulted by the strong undead. Merlin laughs and says that her powers are hers, so she doesn't need to prove them to others, and now, because of her foolishness, her knights have died. As Merlin is not interested in helping her, he says goodbye to her, but the high-level skeleton attacks him before he can leave. With no other choice left, he has to kill the skeleton as it dares to charge at him. Cecilia notices Merlin's overwhelming power and asks him to rescue them, but Merlin refuses and asks why he should help her. Cecilia promises to give him a reward. Merlin thinks she insulted him before, so he should scam her and ask for 5,000 gold coins. He agrees and says he will help her, but the reward should be before he finishes. Cecilia thinks a strong person like him would not be interested in money or fame, so she removes her clothes and promises to please him. But Merlin angrily tells her to stop, as he only wants the 5,000 gold coins. Merlin then takes out the sword and creates a platform for them to stay. He says the undead can't climb that high, and as he is busy, he will come back to save them, and he leaves. Meanwhile, Alice watches the fight and understands why Claude always talks about the previous realm. She thinks this is bigger than she can handle, so she should inform the guild master first. Ian insults Claude and says that his movement has gotten slower. This makes Claude angry as he attacks Ian with his skill, but Ian laughs and uses his secret art, the King of Skeletons, so a giant magical skeleton appears in front of the giant skeleton. Claude uses his secret art Tempest mode, but before the two can attack each other, the roof collapses, and Merlin comes down and says he is on time. He asks Claude about Alice, while Claude is confused about how Merlin crossed the first and second levels filled with undead. Alice is still hiding and realizes that he broke the layers to reach the boss. Ian angrily asks Merlin who he is and how he dares barge into his eternal resting place. Ian attacks Merlin with magic, but to his surprise, Merlin is unharmed by it. Alice knows that magic doesn't work on Merlin because, in the past, the church suffered a great loss due to his anti-magic. Merlin tells Ian that he is a skeleton worth 5,000 gold coins, so he should be patient. But Ian uses the giant skeleton to attack Merlin. Claude thinks that even he cannot take a direct hit from the king's skeleton, so Merlin must be finished. But to his surprise, Merlin stops the punch and is unharmed by it. Ian is confused, as there is no way a person could stop the king's skeleton. Hammer Merlinman destroys the king's skeleton and kills Ian with a single strike. Claude thinks no one can defeat Merlin, even among the four heroes. If he joins their side, they will achieve their goal. Merlin is happy that he obtained the 5,000 gold coins, and while leaving, he notices a key on the floor. In front of Claude's eyes, Merlin picks up the key. Claude then asks Merlin to give him the key, and in return, Claude will give him 200,000 gold coins. Merlin is shocked to know that this key is worth 200,000 coins. He thinks of betting everything on the racecourse, but suddenly hears Alice's voice. Alice appears and tells Merlin not to give the key to Claude. She explains everything to Merlin. Claude is an undead who plans to revive the previous realm. If he wants the key, a big secret must be hidden in it. Merlin thinks that the key is for treasure. If he can find that treasure, then he will be able to pay all his debts. Claude concludes that these two must be killed to ensure the plan's success. He then quickly dashes toward Alice and attacks her, but Merlin stops Claude's attack and saves Alice. Merlin says he can't let Alice die because he doesn't want to pay the full rent. Claude then asks Merlin to hand over the key and forget about what happened here, and then he will let him go. But as Merlin declines his offer, Claude suddenly attacks Alice, but she is saved by Merlin, who blocks the attack with his hands. Claude is surprised that Merlin can block the attack and notices that Merlin is so fast and even faster than him in Tempest mode. While blocking the attack, Merlin tells Claude that he can't allow him to harm Alice since they are paying house rent together, and he doesn't want to pay it alone. Then, Alice manages to sneak attacks Claude and injures him. As the holy sword is effective on Claude, Alice believes he is truly an undead. Alice then suggests to Merlin that they work together to defeat Claude, but Merlin declines as he doesn't join hands while fighting someone. Merlin then tells Claude that Alice won't interfere, so now they can have their 1 versus 1 battle. Claude removes his mask and accepts Merlin's challenge. He then awakens his Tempest mode and dashes toward Merlin to attack him. As Claude is about to strike Merlin, he looks into his eyes and jumps back. Due to Claude's senses being extremely sharp in Tempest mode, he can tell that Merlin is extremely dangerous as he is far above the saint rank. Claude says that even though he is scared of Merlin, this makes him happy because an enemy has appeared on whom he can use his full powers, and he knows Merlin understands his feelings. Merlin replies that he understands the feeling of being invincible, and Claude must feel happy to come across an opponent on par with him. But unfortunately, Merlin says Claude is not an enemy, which makes him happy, shocking Claude. Angrily, Claude tells Merlin to admit he is an evenly matched opponent, but Merlin replies that being evenly matched with him will be a saddening insult. Getting angrier because of Merlin's insults, Claude tells Merlin that he will fight Merlin with his full powers to leave with no regrets. Merlin and Claude start to battle. Suddenly, Claude activates a forbidden technique, and Alice explains to Merlin that the forbidden technique is the sacrifice of a madman that allows one to exchange their life for 100 times their power instantly. Alice is surprised to see Claude use the forbidden technique because her teacher told her it had disappeared from the world. After observing, Claude races forward with all his might and attacks Merlin. Both clashes, with Claude attacking while Merlin launches several counterattacks. After some time, Claude swings his sword and hits Merlin, concluding that he has killed him. However, in the next second, Merlin swings his sword and slices Claude. Claude murmurs in his last moments that he has killed him, so how is Merlin still alive? Merlin responds that it was just an afterimage and that he is fast but slower than his sword. Then Claude remembers being killed with the same blade technique and grumbles, as expected from the strongest demon, Lucifer, and then he dies. Merlin gazes at Claude's body and concludes he has misheard him since he seldom travels, so no one outside the demon species would recognize him. Seeing the battle that just ended, Alice is shocked at how strong Merlin is. Then Alice approaches Merlin and warns him that the key might contain secrets, and thus he needs to deliver it to the country. Merlin, on the other hand, refuses. He then proposes to Alice that they split the treasure because they are acquaintances. But Alice is curious about how he knows the keys to a treasure. Merlin reveals to Alice that he owes a few thousand coins while she owes many millions. If she does not accept his offer, she will remain a slave for the rest of her life, with no other option. Alice accepts his proposal but believes Merlin has duped her. Merlin then mentions a problem. How will they discover the key's secret? Alice says that she has a highly knowledgeable acquaintance whom they may consult. The remaining undead, drawn by the key's magic, suddenly attack the two. As they approach the zombies, Merlin orders Alice not to drag him down. A few moments earlier, the soldiers outside the maze were ready for battle. Hobbs and Arnold were together, and as soon as the war began, they quickly ran from the battlefield. But before they could escape, they were attacked by the three-headed skeleton. And as the skeleton was about to kill them, it disappeared before their eyes. Not just the skeleton but all the undead vanished, and the soldiers celebrated their victory. Hobbs and Arnold then quickly stood up and praised themselves. After a while, the leader gave 5,000 gold coins to Alice for defeating two saint-ranked beings in the army of undead. Alice tried to explain that Merlin had done all that, but the leader couldn't believe an iron-plate adventurer could beat two saint ranks. Meanwhile, Hobbs and Arnold tell Merlin they defeated the three-headed undead alone. Later, the leader told a messenger to inform the queen that two saint-ranked individuals from the previous realm had a battle, and when both of them weakened, Alice, a gold-plate adventurer, gave them a final blow. Merlin, an iron-plate adventurer, witnessed this. Meanwhile, a man was cursing Bernard in another place as he could not return the key. The other members of the four heroes bowed before the man and asked him to calm down, as he needed to take care of his body. The man then asked Kalsona about the investigation of Bernard's death. She explained that Bernard and the necromancer Ian had battled and were weakened when a gold-plated adventurer gave them their final blow. She added that, according to her, the key was probably with that adventurer. The man then ordered the other two members, Zoe and Joey, to stay and protect the shrine, and ordered Kalsona to head to Wrexham and take the key from that adventurer. 2 days later, Luja welcomed Alice and showed her the news of her defeating the two saint-ranked beings. Merlin then asked Luja to give him his money. She explained that Merlin had earned 6,000 gold coins from the mission, and after deducting their debt, the total was 1,800 gold coins. Merlin and Alice angrily asked Lugia why she calculated their debt and reward together. Lugia replied that, according to the documents, the two of them were married, so all of their wealth would be combined. Alice then angrily asked the guild master about the documents. Taylor explained that to register Merlin as an adventurer, he used a loophole and registered Merlin as Alice's husband. Also, during registration, Alice said that she would be the guarantee for Merlin. Merlin and Alice then asked Lugia if they could change this married relationship. Luga replied, "Yes, you can, but first, you need to show me your divorce certificate." Alice then heard Merlin muttering that his debt was just a few thousand coins, but Alice's was several million, and now he needed to shoulder all of it. Alice smiled and thought karma had hit Merlin, as he was the reason plus 306,900, she was in this massive debt. Seeing the situation, Merlin quickly quit being an adventurer and tried to leave, but Alice stopped him and said that he had to take responsibility for this, as no matter where he went, he would still be a wanted criminal. Lugia then smiled and informed them that there was a rule for married couples that they must take a mission together, or she wouldn't approve of it. She explained that in the past, there was a pair of adventurer couples where the wife went on a mission and cheated on her husband, so the guild made this new rule. Arnold then suggested to Solace to marry him, and if she did, he would pay all of her debt, but Alice refused his offer, as she couldn't sell herself to pay her debt. Merlin then asked Alice about the reward for Denbighshire. So, after deducting the deposit for the house, gardening fees, maintenance fees, cleaning fees, grocery fees, and other fees, he got a single gold coin. This shocked Merlin, as he had worked for so long and only earned a single coin. Alice questions Merlin about his sentiments when she gets home because their debt is now together. Alice insists there is still a possibility since they can accept SS or higher ranked missions that pay at least 100,000 gold coins, despite Merlin's advice to just forget about it because they can't complete paying it. Merlin, however, is uninterested since, in his opinion, the guild still needs SS rank objectives. Alice then informs Merlin that, according to the guild master, an SSS rank task was completed 10 years ago with a 20 million gold coin prize. And if they could execute just one high-level task, they wouldn't have to worry about paying their bills. Merlin is astonished to find that, aside from the money, his true purpose as an explorer is to beat great adversaries to extend his life. So, he decides that if they can take the SSS rank task, he has nothing to lose, and he reasons that if he utilizes this money to win the race, he can live 7 lifetimes without worrying. He then asks Alice if the SSS rank mission is particularly difficult. Alice replies that it is extremely hard, and according to the guild master, the SSS rank commission from 10 years ago has something to do with the giant monster of the North Sea, and none of the Saint rank adventurers could defeat it. Finally, a church hero came to their aid. She said he was her senior, the legendary spear hero, and Merlin knew about him, much to her surprise. Merlin told her that his mother had fought with the spear hero, the most amazing battle he had ever seen. Merlin then asked Alice if she knew anything about the spear hero because he might be able to lift his curse by fighting the spear hero. Alice replied that she didn't know much about him, just that he was a legend and one of the 10 legendary heroes. This surprises Merlin because only 10 individuals can fight, so they are worth slaying, but Alice has no idea where they are. She claims that one day the bishop got drunk and started talking gibberish about how the mythical heroes had all vanished, and that if one of them was present, they could push Merlin Lucifer to the ground and make him call them daddy. Later, Merlin pulls out the key and asks Alice when she will take him to her buddy to find the treasures. However, Alice says she is on a mission and will return with him as soon as possible. The following morning, Merlin is reading the newspaper in the bathroom as Alice begs him to let her out because she can't take it any longer. The doorbell rings as Merlin steps outside. He opens the door to see Lugia standing outside the home. She informs Merlin that the two of them must accompany her since the Redbud Knights from the palace have sent some people to visit them. After a while, Merlin and Alice reach the guild. While waiting for the knights, Merlin reminds Alice not to confess anything about the key. The Redbud Knights then enter the guild, and their leader, Brent Chapman, goes up to them and introduces himself. He then asks them about the incident and what they know about the previous realm's 4 heroes and guardians. Alice tells him that the 2 saint ranks were talking about reviving the previous realm and obtaining a new power, but she couldn't hear them clearly as she was too far away. She adds that according to Bernard, the person who revived the 4 heroes is the prince from the previous realm, who has lived until now by sucking elves' blood. Brent thinks that as the population of elves is very sparse, they can track their stronghold. Brent then asks Alice how she defeated the 2 saint-ranked individuals because even if they were on the verge of death, Alice should not be able to kill them. However, Alice says in a low voice that she didn't defeat them and points toward Merlin, saying that he was the one who killed them. But Brent and the other knights laugh at Alice and assume she is trying to give credit to her husband. Alice looks at them with teary eyes, as no matter what she says, the knights won't believe her. But Merlin interrupts their conversation and says that the Necromancer and Bernard weren't strong, they were just high ranks. Brent concludes that the 4 heroes from the previous realm were not that strong and praises Merlin for telling the truth, unlike Alice. The knights then say goodbye to them and leave outside. As the knights leave, Brent notices a woman passing by and is shocked. He thinks the woman resembles the dragon-taming robber Kalsona from the previous realm, but the four heroes have no reason to come to Wrexham. He probably mistook it just now. The story continues several days after the meeting with the Redbud Knights. Alice was secretly training near a waterfall. She freezes the waterfall with her ice magic. And when she is almost happy that she has done it, the water pressure destroys her ice. Looking tired, she murmurs that she is still a bit away from the saint rank. But she abruptly hears a voice say it's not a little, but the distance between the sky and earth. When she glances around, she sees Merlin laughing at her. She asked how he knew she was here, and Merlin said that Alice had been leaving early and arriving late for the past few days, so he followed her out of curiosity. She tells Merlin that she has to train to reach the saint rank soon, but Merlin asks if trying to break through like that is effective over time. Merlin then tells her she is wasting her time, but she replies that is how she has been training. He tells her that she asked him how he got so strong, and he tells her that being in a near-death situation will make it easier for her to unleash her potential. Alice then recalls and believes what Merlin said because her mana and aura were refined after she was battered nearly to death by the Goblin Emperor. But she refutes this, though, as she is not a moron who would randomly seek out death. After that, Merlin offers to train with her, but she asks if he wants revenge. But Merlin asks why he will do that, and he wants to train her so she can do more to pay off debt as her level rises. She objects, though, stating that she would be in danger if Merlin had malicious intentions. However, Merlin tells her she is troublesome and picks up a twig. He says he will use a twig in the fight. Then he tells her to attack him and makes fun of her by reminding her of when he stripped her of her armor. Then, in a rage, Alice attacks Merlin with ice magic, but Merlin's anti-magic dispels it. She immediately sprints toward Merlin and attacks him, but Merlin easily dodges all her attacks because she is moving too slowly for him. Alice is furious and sprints full speed toward Merlin, but Merlin accidentally knocks her to the ground. After some time, Alice becomes upset with Merlin for striking her. Merlin later regrets his hands slipping during practice and even makes lunch for her. After taking the first taste, Alice is astonished by how tasty it is. She is further discouraged, however, when she realizes that Merlin is also a better cook than she is. After finishing dinner, she announces to Merlin that going forward, he will be in charge of cooking, and she will take care of the housework. The next day at the Adventurers Guild, Merlin curses Hobbs for his inaccurate comments about the race. Hobbs tells him to calm down, as it's normal to lose 1 or 2 times in races. But he is shocked when he hears Merlin has never won, even after betting 100 times. Still, he motivates Merlin to try a few more times. However, Merlin has no money as Alice has hidden it well. So he takes out the key and realizes treasure hunting is more reliable. Suddenly, Merlin feels someone's gaze on him. The person is Kalsona, who has gone to look for Alice but notices the key in Merlin's possession. She knows that Merlin is Alice's husband and that she can't feel any magic from him. So she smiles and murmurs she will take the key back from a mere villager. Later, Hobbs then offers to take Merlin to Helena's secret cottage, a place any man would understand. Intrigued, Merlin agrees to go with Hobbs. Merlin reaches the secret cottage with Hobbs and another man from the guild. When Merlin looks at Helena, he thinks Alice should see what a real woman looks like. Hobbs then introduces Merlin to Helena, and as soon as Helena sees Merlin, she is shocked. She then takes the 3 men to the VIP room, where Hobbs and the other man enjoy their time. After a while, Kalsona, dressed as a performer, arrives and shows her dance moves to impress Merlin and the other knights. But Merlin thinks something is wrong with this woman, so he insults Kalsona and tries to leave. But before Merlin can leave, Helena informs him that someone wants to meet with him. This shocks Hobbs and Merlin, who think this someone might be Alice. Helena then takes Merlin underground, so he thinks that, luckily, it isn't Alice, as he would get a good scolding if the Guardian of Justice were to know about this. After reaching the place, Helena quickly bows before Merlin and greets him. Merlin realizes that Helena is a demon and asks how she recognizes him. Helena explains that she is the servant and general of Asmodeus, the demon king of the 4th palace and the ruler of lust, who is a friend of Merlin. Merlin is shocked to learn that Asmodeus, a demon dressed as a woman to save his palace from economic depression, has become an idol. Merlin notices a magic mirror, so he sits before it and asks Asmodeus to show himself. Asmodeus appears and greets Merlin. Merlin tries to act smug in front of Asmodeus, but when he reveals how Merlin fell in love with him when they first met, Merlin tells him to stop. Asmodeus informs Merlin that the parliamentary elders are looking for him, as the title of the first demon king of the Palace of Pride is now vacant. Merlin asks if Asmodeus just wants to inform him about that. Asmodeus then tells him that his subordinates have found traces of Hell's envoys in Great Britain. Since Merlin previously had a feud with Hell, Asmodeus suggests he be careful. But Merlin tells him not to worry, as he will slay Satan, the Lord of Hell, if he comes after him. After the meeting, Merlin tells Helen not to call him Lucifer, as he is no longer the Demon King. However, Helen misunderstands his intentions and thinks Merlin is on a secret mission for the demon race. Despite knowing that Helen misunderstands him, Merlin still tries to use her and says that, for the sake of the mission, he wants her to pay his debt for him. But as soon as Helen hears that the debt is more than 10 million gold coins, she quickly shuts the door on him and tells Merlin to go home and sleep. As Merlin goes home, Kalsona follows him and decides to kill him. She dashes toward Merlin and attacks him with her daggers, but Merlin senses the attack and uses his sword to knock her down. He realizes Kalsona is the same lady from the pub, so he tells her to stop hitting him and leaves. Kalsona is shocked and realizes Merlin has been hiding his strength, so she can't steal the key back. Soon, a black portal opens and asks Kalsona about the mission. Kalsona bows and tells the man their opponent is probably at the peak of saint rank. This shocks the man, and he realizes that Merlin has defeated Bernard. Kalsona asks the man if he remembers the Frost Saint Dragon Isram. This Frost Dragon is one of the 6 Saint Dragons and was contracted with the former king as the guardian of the former realm. The 1,000 court mages had sealed the dragon when the realm was destroyed and fell into a deep sleep. Kalsona says that she knows the language of dragons to awaken Isram. The man says their strength will be doubled and invisible if Isram abides by the contract with his father. The next day, Alice trains with Merlin to reach the saint rank quickly. But like before, she attacks Merlin with magic, and he easily knocks her down. While resting, Merlin suggests that she change her style, as being a magic swordsman is too much for her. But she refuses, as she has vowed to become the successor of the Great Snow Mountain. When training with her teacher, she asks Merlin if his weapon is why he is so strong. In the past, the bishop had told her that Merlin's demon sword was strong, but that Merlin, as a person, was not. However, Merlin denies this and explains that the sword is the king's weapon, mainly used to prove one's identity. Those not acknowledged by the sword can't even pull it out. He then gives his sword to Alice and asks her to try pulling it out. Alice tries to pull the sword with all her strength but cannot do it. After resting for a while, Alice starts her training again. While fighting, Alice uses her new move on Merlin, but before he can react, he feels intense pain in his heart that he can't handle. He starts falling toward Alice, and she realizes something is wrong. She uses her full force to change the direction of the attack, but her sword still scratches Merlin. Finally, his heart stops hurting, but Alice scolds him for head-butting her. Merlin looks at his hand and is confused, as even though the church's holy water doesn't work on him, Alice's sword manages to cut him. He picks up the sword and notices it is strange, as if it defies him. He returns the sword to Alice and asks her why she put a seal on it. But Alice has no clue about it, as she stole the sword from her teacher. She explains that she secretly ran out of the mountains, thinking she was ready for the outside world. Merlin then insults Alice for running from her teacher and ends the training for the night. A few days later, Alice took Merlin to meet her friend Da Vinci so she could tell them about the key. As Alice approached Da Vinci, she was grabbed from behind by a woman named Rossetti. Alice looked at her disgustedly. Alice couldn't handle her sweet words and coughed up blood from her mouth. Rossetti then looked at Merlin and asked Alice if he was her husband, whom everyone was talking about. Alice refused and said they were not married but just a normal couple, and asked him if she was better than Alice. But before Merlin could say anything, Alice jumped between them and told Rossetti to stay away from Merlin, as he was hers. Alice changed the topic before Merlin's and Rossetti's cold gazes. Alice thought that the only person she liked was Elgin's master swordsman, but the food that Merlin made was delicious. Without wasting any time, Merlin showed the key to Da Vinci and asked her about it. After looking at the key, Da Vinci told him that the key was a remnant from the previous realm. When she tried to examine it through her magic, she felt an ominous aura from it that terrified her. She told Merlin that the aura emitted by the key didn't belong to this world, and she asked him to give the key to her so she could study it thoroughly. Merlin refused at first, but after Alice's guarantee, he gave the key to her. The story continues a week later. Calzona reaches where the frost dragon is sealed in the Ben Nevis Mountains. She looks around and realizes they have paid a miserable price to seal it, as so many high-ranked mages have died in the ice torrent. She goes close to the sealed dragon and speaks in the dragon's language, saying, "Oh, the great descendant of the 6 saint dragons, the ruler of ice, the protector of the royals that have slept till now, awaken upon my summoning. Come forth, the frost saint dragon Isram." The next second, Isram awakens and appears in front of Calzona. Calzona introduces herself and asks if Isram remembers her. Isram tells her to stop using her crappy dragon language as she can speak human language. Calzona is surprised that the dragon can speak in human language, and she tells her it has been a long time and she doesn't think Isram will remember her. Suddenly, Isram screams at Calzona and tells her to address her respectfully. This scares Calzona, and she then bows in front of Isram and congratulates her on gaining her freedom after 400 years. Isram asks how she is still alive, as she has long passed the limit of a human's lifespan. Calzona explains that she was revived to become undead by His Highness Copperfield, who has lived until now through the blood of elves and is working hard to revive the previous realm. She then asks Isram to help them, but he refuses, saying that he protected the kingdom because of the contract with the king. But there is no need for that now. Calzona asks Isram to help them in return for reviving her, but she still refuses, as helping them revive the realm isn't a fair deal. Calzona then asks her to defeat someone for her, and Isram agrees. However, Isram asks her, isn't she one of the top humans, and isn't it rare for her to have an enemy she can't deal with? Then Calzona replies that the guy is very strong and she isn't 100% sure if she can kill him. Finding it interesting, Isram asks where her enemy is. Meanwhile, at night, Merlin suddenly wakes up as his heart starts hurting again, and while Isram is thinking of killing the enemy, Merlin is also thinking of killing a strong individual to ease the curse. Calzona then tells Isram that she will prepare everything and the enemy will come only to die themselves. Still, at night, Merlin is in pain, and he thinks that the interval of the curse is shorter than usual because he recently killed Bernard and Ian. But they are both undead, so killing them didn't help with his curse. Also, even the Goblin Emperor was so weak that it couldn't alleviate his curse. Alice comes downstairs and asks Merlin why he isn't sleeping and is tossing around so much. She then sees Merlin sweating and in severe pain. This surprises Alice since it's rare to see Merlin in pain, and she asks him what is wrong. She tries to help Merlin, but he refuses her help, saying it's an old problem and he's used to it. He then lies down on the bed. Alice puts a blanket on Merlin and says he doesn't have to bear it alone, and if something like this happens again, he can just call her. But she realizes what she has just said and quickly changes the topic. She says she's worried about him because they pay the rent together, so she would be in trouble if he died for no reason. Merlin thinks that even Alice pities him, and he feels like a failure as a demon king. Alice then puts hot milk on the side and tells him to take care, and as Alice leaves, Merlin stops her. Merlin says they have been resting for a while and should do some work now. He also tells Alice to at least think about what she is wearing as her clothes are translucent, though he's not interested in a flat chest. Alice shouts at Merlin and quickly goes upstairs. In her room, she curses Merlin, saying she doesn't care if he dies anymore, and downstairs, Merlin wonders if Alice is worried for him. But he concludes that she treats everyone like that based on her personality. The next day at the guild, Alice and Merlin walk in, and Hobbs greets them, saying they are inseparable even in the morning, so it must be true love. However, Alice remembers and scolds Hobbs for taking Merlin to an indecent place. Alice and Merlin are checking the missions they can accept, and Luja informs them that yesterday she received a specific request for them. This surprises Alice and Merlin asks what a specific request is. Alice explains that it is a way of commissioning from the Adventurers Guild, where employers can appoint certain candidates to complete specific tasks. She then asks Luja what the commission is. Luja replies that the request is from the Sujaji village at the foot of Ben Nevis Mountain. She tells them that the villagers' dragons are attacking there. Luja adds that there's a rumor of a dragon eating humans and demanding young girls as sacrifices. Hearing that dragons are involved, Merlin thinks that ever since dragons migrated to the southern United Kingdom, the dragon race has been rarely seen by humans, and it is extremely unusual for dragons to attack at this time of the year. Luja tells them the mission level is S, and the reward is 20,000 gold coins. Merlin asks about the dragon's strength, and Hobbs tells him that it's not a normal dragon but one of the 6 saint dragons, and his ice room is sealed nearby, so it must be Ice Room, the ice dragon. This shocks Luja, as even the Thorn Knights couldn't defeat one of the 6 saint dragons. Hobbs comments that only the Demon King living in the north could defeat one. Luja asks why only the Demon King could defeat one. Hobbs explains that a few years ago, the sacred dragon Ives went to fight Lucifer III but have yet to return. Meanwhile, Merlin is happy to hear such praise about himself. He thinks this is worth exploring if it's Ice Room, so he says they will accept the task. Luja is against this idea as it is dangerous, but Alice says she can't just sit back and watch if there are casualties. She is determined to continue, so they decide to take on this task. After a while, Arnold barges into the guild and asks Alice to return the heart she stole from him, but Hobbs tells him that Alice is away on a mission with Merlin. At the same time, Merlin sneezes, so Alice asks him if he feels cold. But Merlin replies that he never feels cold and that maybe someone is saying bad things about him. Merlin tells her he doesn't feel cold because he's a cold-blooded animal. Merlin then removes his gloves and touches Alice's cheeks. To Alice's surprise, his hands are warm. He then reveals that the demon's body temperature is higher than a human. Alice then throws a bag at him and says he lost so much money on horse racing that he can't afford a scarf, so she is gifting him one. Merlin says the scarf looks like a bargain, but whatever lands in this devil's hand belongs to him, so he wears it. They then notice an ice mountain and wonder if this is the doing of the ice dragon. Meanwhile, Ice Room waits inside the ice mountain. She is angry that Kaltsona brought her to a small village, but Kaltsona apologizes. Ice Room tells her not to bother since humans are worthless to her and killing them won't help her acquire immortal merit. But she does enjoy humans as food. Kaltsona notices how arrogant Ice Room is and wonders how the former Realm King managed to sign a contract with her. Kaltsona informs Ice Room that their target will arrive soon, so she should not be restless. Ice Room tells her not to make her wait too long since she has not seen her old friends for a long time. She promises that after she helps Kaltsona kill the enemy, she will meet her old friend, Ives. But when Kaltsona turns pale upon hearing the name Ives, Ice Room demands to know what happened. Kaltsona tells her that she heard a rumor about Lord Ives, but she still determines if it is true. Ice Room orders her to speak, and Kaltsona reveals that she heard Lord Ives had died at the hands of the ruler of pride, Merlin Lucifer. This angers Ice Room, and she says there is no way a mere demon king could kill her friend Ives, who had absolute control over the dark creatures. She finds it impossible for just a ruler of pride to slay him. Kaltsona quickly tells her that it was just a rumor that the Holy See had sent the sacred dragon Ives to fight Lucifer III, the demon king, but the sacred dragon Ives never returned. However, Ice Room refuses to believe it and says it's impossible. She then decides to investigate the matter herself after killing Kaltsona's enemy. Seeing that her plan is working, Kaltsona tells her that the enemy is almost there, and they must show themselves. Then, Merlin and Alice reach outside the ice mountain, and Alice notices the bigger mountain. A little girl named Simon greets them and says that she was the one who invited them to defeat the dragon. As Simon talks with them, a shadow observes them.
The story continues as the fight between Merlin and the red-haired demon is about to start. The red-haired girl attacks Merlin with a fire whip and shouts that she will teach him a lesson for what he did to Trist, but to her surprise, her attack doesn't even scratch Merlin. She keeps swinging her fire whip, but Merlin dodges everything. Seeing that her attacks are not working, she tries to blow Merlin away with a fireball attack, but Merlin dispels it. But it turns out to be a two-layer attack, causing a larger explosion. The red-haired demon is sure that Merlin cannot survive that kind of explosion, even if he can block magical attacks. However, she is surprised when Merlin walks out unharmed, telling her the explosion made him angry. She angrily orders her minions to combine and show Merlin their true powers. The minions and the red-haired demon combine into a huge infernal demon, scaring everyone. But to everyone's surprise, Merlin destroys the infernal demon and the Hell Gate with a single strike. The knight observing the scene is astonished by the Elgin Master Swordsman's ability to vanquish such a formidable monster with just one strike, confirming that his title is well deserved. However, Merlin laments that the demon is merely a puppet, preventing him from gaining more years for his curse. After everything clears, Copperfield is devastated as he realizes that his hopes and ambitions have been shattered by this one man.
Seeing this, Merlin tells him that someone who borrows the strength of others is not qualified to be a king. However, Copperfield asks why Merlin wouldn't want to control the world and enjoy everything it has to offer. In response, Merlin explains that ruling the world is burdensome and he has no interest in it. Seeing that Merlin's laziness inadvertently saved the world, Alice wishes for him to remain lazy forever. Merlin also tells Copperfield he is an adventurer of the iron rank and wants to live a carefree life. Unexpectedly, Copperfield goes insane and claims to know Merlin's true identity. He says that Merlin is a god and that he could never defeat him as a mere mortal. Seeing Merlin let Copperfield live, Alice asks why Merlin doesn't kill him for his numerous terrible actions, but Merlin tells her a person without dreams is already dead and unworthy of being killed. Upon their return to the village, the villagers express their gratitude to Alice and Merlin for rescuing them and offer to pay them for their heroic efforts. Despite Alice's inclination to decline the payment, Merlin eagerly accepts it, citing their hard work and the need to pay their rent. Along the way, Alice becomes furious with Merlin for taking the money as the villagers require it to repair their community. During their journey, Alice introduces Shirley, an elf girl from the United Kingdom who was abducted against her will by Copperfield, as she explains to Merlin. Alice informs Merlin that they will be assisting Shirley in returning to her home. However, Merlin suggests that Alice should mind her own business. Then Alice tells Merlin that Shirley will stay with them at their home. But Merlin retorts that since he paid the rent, it is also his home, and she needs his permission. An argument ensues between them, with each claiming ownership. Shirley observes Merlin's discontent and offers him a staggering 1,000,000 gold coins as compensation, surprising Alice and Merlin. Shirley reveals that she uses such a vast sum as her pocket money. Shirley asks Merlin if 1,000,000 coins are enough for him, to which Merlin replies that protecting ladies is part of his job. At night, after Shirley sleeps, Alice asks Merlin what the infernal lady is talking about, and the topic horrifies him. Seeing his expression, Alice is shocked, and Merlin replies that he finally managed to forget. But now he is starting to remember. Noticing his behavior, Alice thinks what happened stressed Merlin, and she starts to wonder what happened. Merlin explains that when he was still a demon king, Trist approached him and introduced herself as an emissary of hell. As soon as he looked at her, he realized that the world was scary as he coughed up blood just by looking at her. She offered him to join Satan's army, but Merlin instantly refused. He sent her flying when she mentioned him coming to hell to check it out. He continued that Trist thought he wouldn't willingly, so she threatened him. So, he guessed that her failure reached her higher-ups in hell, and they were back for payback for the troubles he had caused her. Alice realized that Merlin misunderstood Trist's words and made Satan his enemy. After getting to Wrexham, Merlin looks at the dragon's stone, wondering if it would be useful, which would depend on Alice. At the same time, Alice and Shirley are enjoying the bath. Merlin hears their conversation and thinks the crystal can fix Alice's washboard physique. At night, Shirley praises Merlin as he's good at fighting and cooking. After she finishes eating, she tells them that she thinks they will make an excellent married couple, but Merlin and Alice instantly rebuke her, saying they are not. At the same time, in some other place on the Dover Strait, two men are on a boat when the first one, who looks like a ferryman, says this is the third expedition ever since the alchemist came to the island and the local fish have begun to mutate, causing them to be inedible and also a danger to human beings. The other mercenary man replies that the alchemist is just a bookworm, and there is reason to fear him. This man is scared and tells the mercenary he must succeed. And the mercenary, named Mark the Great, tells him not to worry and says that he is a famous mercenary, so a mere alchemist can't be a match for him. The mercenary notices something moving in the fog and asks his men to be careful. Suddenly, something flies at him, but he uses his armor to block the attack. Then he notices that what attacked him was a mutated fish. The man becomes terrified as many fish start to attack and kill his men one by one. Before he can understand anything, a monster appears from the bottom of the sea and crushes his boat. Then, we see a man who murmurs that anyone shouldn't underestimate the alchemist and shouts that he's coming to meet his sweet lady, Asmodeus. Back at home, with the elf girl sound asleep, Merlin seizes the opportunity for a one-on-one conversation with Alice, promising to reveal a significant prize. He refers to it as the dragon's crystal and advises Alice to stop having negative thoughts, noticing her expression. Skeptical, Alice inquires about its origin, to which Merlin discloses that he obtained it after defeating Ice Ram. He explains that the crystal can help her swiftly ascend to the saint rank, granting her the power of one of the 6 saint dragons, a superhuman body, and an immense amount of magical power, drawing from the dragon race's martial arts and spells. Merlin adds that if they grind the crystal before consumption, she can gain the dragon's strength without undergoing any physical changes. Concerned, Alice wonders if eating the crystal will turn her into a dragon, But Merlin reassures her, emphasizing that any transformation depends on her ability to handle the sudden surge in power. Alice takes the crystal, and some time passes. Merlin inquires whether she feels any changes after accessing the dragon's strength, but Alice admits feeling nothing different, and everything remains the same. She concludes that the crystal must be a fake, doubting its authenticity. In response, Merlin assures her that he would never make such an error and insists that the crystal is indeed genuine. Later, Merlin is thinking about why the crystal didn't work on Alice when he notices someone approaching. As soon as he sees her, thinking it's Alice, he gets shocked as her chest is now big. But that person turns out to be Shirley, who asks Merlin to come with her because something is happening to Alice. Merlin goes inside the room and notices Alice covered in a freezing aura. Shirley asks what is happening to Alice and if she will be alright. Merlin realizes that Alice cannot control her newfound powers, so he asks Shirley to sleep on the couch while he fixes her. He goes close to Alice and sleeps next to her, and just like he thought, his anti-magic body manages to help Alice. Merlin is confused, as when Alice touches him, his heart rate goes up. The next day, Alice opens her eyes and finds Merlin beside her, asking if she slept well. Shirley runs upstairs after hearing a shout and finds Alice on top of Merlin. Alice is shocked and asks Merlin what he is doing in her bed. But Merlin laughs and tells her it is okay since they are a married couple. However, she starts to cry and accuses Merlin of taking her innocence and purity. But Merlin tells her to calm down, as he's just helping her because her body is unable to keep the dragon's power under control. He goes close to Alice and explains that until she reaches Saint rank, they need to share the bed, or who knows what would happen to her. After hearing his words, Alice knows she's in deep trouble, but a blush appears on her face. After some time has passed, Alice approaches Merlin for help in quickly reaching the Saint rank, expressing her desire not to rely on him longer than necessary. Playfully, Merlin teases her and claims she gave him numerous hugs the previous night. However, Alice firmly instructs him not to reveal what transpired during their previous encounter. Just then, Da Vinci and Rossetti arrive to greet them. Da Vinci, upon seeing Alice, inquires about her well-being, recalling that the last time she saw Merlin, he mentioned her abduction. Alice reassures Da Vinci that she is fine, but Rossetti seizes the opportunity to sarcastically taunt her about her flat chest. Da Vinci advises Alice to cherish her relationship with Merlin, acknowledging that despite being an adventurer of the Iron rank, he has shown remarkable determination to surpass his peers. After a while, they reach the waterfall, and Merlin tells her to try manifesting her aura. Alice checks her aura and says that the power of the dragon race is incredible, but Merlin taunts her and says that this is nowhere near their power, and once she fully absorbs the crystal, her power will be several times stronger than this. He also tells her she has more work to do if she wants to ascend to the Saint rank explosively. Alice then confidently says that in just some time, she will surpass him. But Merlin tells her it's unlikely. She tells him not to underestimate her and then attacks Merlin with her newly acquired dragon powers, but in just a few seconds, she understands that the reality is so harsh. While returning, Merlin tells her to focus on clearing the debts, which is more realistic than defeating him. Suddenly, they are stopped by the different shop owners at the market, who thank Alice for always helping them. As they were going back to their home, they were stopped by the landlady. She smiled and said they looked like they had been married for years. Merlin thought he would never marry a washboard like Alice, while Alice thought she would never marry a perverted demon like Merlin. The landlady said that she missed her husband and told them to be a little more intimate around her. If they agree to do it, then she will think of having their rent. Merlin and Alice quickly get close and ask her how they look. This makes the landlady happy, as she thanks them for bringing back her pleasant memories. After a while, Alice was angry because Merlin suggested being a little more intimate around the landlady to reduce their rent. She then starts preparing for dinner, but after looking at how badly she is treating the food ingredients, Merlin decides to teach her how to chop vegetables. Shirley looks at them, muttering about how they could deny they were a married couple. The next day at the Adventurers Guild, Merlin reads the news about Copperfield and thinks that Copperfield is an unlucky fellow, as he could have conquered any kingdom he desired with an infernal army like that. He was just at the wrong place at the wrong time. Merlin then notices Alice looking at a broadcast from the capital. On the broadcast, the knight who survived is telling the people that the real hero of the expedition was the Elgin Master Swordsman, who defeated the twin swordmaster that had killed Lord Sahaddin, and the infernal demon that was conjured forth. He adds that Copperfield lost his sanity due to the overwhelming power of Elgin's Master Swordsman. Therefore, he is the true hero. The people start cheering for the swordsman of Elgin, surprising Alice and Merlin. Alice thinks that the people mistook Merlin for the swordmaster of Elgin, as they look a little similar, while Merlin is depressed that a previous demon king is now the savior of mankind. Suddenly, the broadcast is cut off and the knight is kicked by someone. It is his captain, Franklin, who says they had a chance to make a name for themselves, but he had gone and squandered it. Franklin then takes out his sword and attempts to kill the knight. But suddenly a giant eagle appears in the sky. The eagle lands, and a red-haired woman comes forward. The knight named Chapman quickly bows and addresses her as Lady Macefield. Franklin says that Chapman went against the orders, so they must punish him, but to his surprise, Macefield slaps him. She asks him if he is trying to drag their queen's name through the mud. Franklin explains that the swordsman's fame threatens their very existence, so they should punish Chapman for assisting him as a traitor. But Macefield says that it's only thanks to Chapman that they have not lost their honor as knights, and the one who needs to be punished is Franklin, as he tried to claim the work of others and lied to the public. Franklin tries to defend himself, but Macefield tells him to leave, as she will report this incident to Her Majesty. She then goes close to Chapman and asks if he is alright. She then apologizes to the public for the uproar caused by Franklin and expresses her gratitude to the Elgin Master Swordsman for the recent expedition on behalf of the Redbud Knights. But she adds that someone afraid of publicizing his identity couldn't be trusted. She then announces that the Elgin Master Swordsman is a wanted criminal, and she will apprehend him on behalf of Great Britain and its citizens. When Merlin hears this, he just smiles and thinks he would like to see her try. Suddenly, the broadcast device stops working, and while Alice is trying to fix the device, Hobbs tells Merlin that he's in danger. He says that, according to Luja, Alice likes this swordsman, so he's in danger of being cuckolded. Alice goes close to them and asks what they are talking about, to which Merlin replies that he was just telling Hobbs about how she kicked him off the bed this morning. Alice shouts that it was because Merlin snuck into her bed in the middle of the night. Arnold hears this conversation as he runs away and says he will never fall in love again. After that, Alice says she promised to cook for Shirley today and asks Merlin to look for a suitable job for them. Hobbs asks about Shirley, but Merlin ignores the question and bribes him to tell him about any jobs around Lydney. Hobbs says that Lydney is home to many strong adventurers, so they usually handle everything themselves, but there was a quest worth 100,000 not long ago. This shocks Merlin, and he asks if the quest is still available, but Hobbs replies that he is out of luck as a 14-year-old mithril adventurer took it. Hobbs says that the adventurer's name is Johnson, and he has the ability to copy any spell he sees. And the scariest thing is that there is no time limit for how long he can keep a copied spell. Once he increases his collection, he will be invincible. Suddenly, Helena enters the guild and greets Hobbs and Merlin. She then asks Hobbs if she can borrow Merlin for a little while, and while Merlin is leaving with her, Hobbs mutters that even though he is married, he is still hungry for more. On the way, Merlin asks Helena why Asmodeus wants to meet him. Helena says that she is unsure, but if she has to guess, it is because Merlin's secret plan is not going well. Merlin then tells her not to discuss this plan with anyone, but he is sorry for fooling her. After a while, Merlin reaches the place and asks Asmodeus about the matter. Asmodeus claims that he has recently been pursued by a fervent human fan who has the problem of using alchemy to transform people into monsters known as alchemy beasts. It's a mutated life form that is only capable of basic attacks. However, Asmodeus continues that his followers told him that they could feel a greater power within them, so he tried to talk to the alchemist. But in return for giving him his alchemy beasts, he wanted to marry him. Merlin says that if he hates the idea that much, he should just refuse the alchemist. But Asmodeus explains that his fourth demon king's palace is closest to the church and is under constant threat, so he needs to increase his military strength. But Merlin tells him not to worry, he will help him if something happens. After some time, Merlin returns home, having had no luck finding any jobs. Upon arriving, he notices Alice engaged in conversation with a woman. Curious, he asks the woman who she is, taking a moment to study her appearance. Cecilia introduces herself, and Merlin remembers her from the incident with the skeleton. Kyle, angered by Merlin's behavior, insults him, but Cecilia intervenes, reminding Kyle that Merlin is the one who saved them. During the discussion, Cecilia reveals her intention to have Merlin accompany her to an island in the Dover Strait to confront the evil alchemist. She explains that she specifically needs Merlin's help to reconcile with her family due to past mistakes, and she is willing to offer fair payment for his services. With a sly grin, Merlin jokes about the possibility of her suggesting to use her body as payment once more. Alice reacts quickly, grabbing Merlin's collar and reminding him to control himself, despite their marriage being a sham. Observing the unfolding scene, Shirley decides not to get involved and retreats upstairs to hide. Enraged by Merlin's remarks, Kyle attempts to attack him, but with a mere tap of a spoon, Merlin sends Kyle flying into the air and crashing into the wall. Cecilia apologizes for Kyle's behavior, and Merlin encourages her to discuss the reward for his assistance, as that's the aspect he's most interested in. Cecilia remarks that she had assumed Lord Merlin would be above such matters, but realizes he is as eager for money as anyone else. Nevertheless, she offers Merlin 300,000 gold coins. Despite his readiness to accept the offer, Alice intervenes, reminding Merlin of his commitment to take Shirley back to her home in Lydney. Merlin declines Cecilia's request, suggesting they talk later, as returning Shirley home could potentially earn them 1,000,000 gold coins. However, Cecilia explains that their journey will pass by Lydney, allowing Shirley to join them, which would also save on travel expenses. Without hesitation, Merlin accepts Cecilia's offer, seeing it as a practical decision. The next day, the group leaves in the carriage. Merlin thinks it's suspicious, as nothing has occurred on this trip. Cecilia then asks Merlin what he thinks about Lydney. Merlin replies that there are so many people, so it's annoying. Cecilia says it is a large city with many places of entertainment like bars, baths, and gambling. Before Merlin can go gambling, he is stopped by Alice, who forbids him from going there. As Merlin and Alice are quarreling about the money, Cecilia asks why they are dividing their wealth if they are married. And before Merlin can say they are not married, Alice stops him and changes the topic. Cecilia looks outside and says it's the College of the Goddess. Merlin notices a stone sculpture before the college and thinks it looks familiar. While Merlin insults the goddess, Kyle advises him to stop, as the goddess's followers might take offense. Kyle adds that this college is Cecilia's alma mater, so he requests that Merlin mind his language. Alice then inquires about Cecilia's daily responsibilities as a student at this college. Cecilia explains that they study holy magic and how to combat demons because of their wicked nature, and all students must be prepared for the holy battle. Merlin then remembers his meeting with Asmodeus and realizes that Asmodeus wants to strengthen his military as the church plans to wage a full-scale war against the demon race. Later, Merlin and Alice accompany Shirley to the embassy. As only authorized individuals are allowed inside, the guards initially try to stop them. However, upon seeing Shirley, the guards bow and address her as Princess Shirley, much to the surprise of Merlin and Alice, who were unaware of Shirley's royal status. After entering the embassy and waiting in the meeting room, Alice is still surprised that Shirley is the youngest daughter of the Elven King and the fifth in line to inherit the throne. Merlin is pained that he didn't know about her royal status and considers 1,000,000 gold coins to be incredibly cheap, and playfully suggests asking for 100,000,000 gold coins from Shirley's father. This shocks Alice. After a while, the guard announces that the Elven ambassador has arrived, and Samuel enters the room. Shirley formally introduces her as her aunt. Samuel expresses gratitude to Alice and Merlin for bringing Shirley back, but she is also thinking about the possibility of killing them. Merlin then asks for the reward, and Alice also asks if the Elven King is the ruler of the Southern United Kingdom. And Shirley replies that among the kings of the 9 races, the strongest will be the Spirit King of the 11 races since, without his leadership, the elves would not be as prosperous as they are today. Merlin asks if the Elven King is that strong and jokingly thinks of killing Shirley's father to extend his life. However, Samuel interrupts them as they are talking. She says that according to her, Shirley's uncle, His Highness Ashdal, ruler of the Dark Elves, is the strongest. Shirley tries to stop Samuel, as mentioning Ashdal's name is forbidden. She explains that in the past, Ashdal refused to assist her father in founding the United Kingdom and even led rebellions with the Dark Elves. However, her father managed to defeat him and put an end to his schemes. When Merlin questions how the Elven King, who is believed to be the strongest, could defeat Ashdal if he genuinely is the most powerful, Samuel reveals that the king ambushed him and killed his own little brother. Learning about Ashdal's immense power excites Merlin. Samuel further describes Ashdal as a genius who could channel the power of God. This surprises Alice, and she asks what Samuel means. Samuel explains that Ashdal might very well be the incarnation of Corellin himself, suggesting that he might have become a living god if he were still alive. Hearing that, Merlin seemed to be thinking of something. After leaving the embassy, Alice starts feeling sad because she already misses Shirley. However, Merlin encourages her to smile, assuring her that he is there to support her. When Alice asks Merlin if he misses his younger sister, he responds with a no, saying he is actually relieved that she is not around because she is even more troublesome than Alice. He goes on to exaggerate, claiming she had murdered every woman who approached him and used their bones to make wine glasses. Merlin humorously explains that dealing with such difficult individuals has made him lose interest in romantic relationships altogether. He then points out that Samuel is a bit biased toward the Dark Elf King since, despite the name being forbidden, she freely uses it. As they continue walking, Merlin notices a commotion on the street and decides to investigate. A man informs him that there's someone accepting arm wrestling challenges, offering a prize of 2,000 gold coins to anyone who can defeat him, but so far, no one has succeeded. Alice observes that the man is concealing his true strength by suppressing his aura. The man declares he's leaving because nobody in Lydney is as strong as him. However, Merlin stops him and challenges him before he can leave. Despite Alice's attempt to dissuade him, Merlin insists she place a wager on him to profit if he wins. After contemplating for a moment, Alice wishes him success and declares that she'll become wealthy as a result. The arm wrestling contest between Merlin and the mysterious man then begins. So, who do you think will win between Merlin and the mysterious man? Also, what do you think his identity is? Tune in to find out the winner of this arm wrestling contest in the next video. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on another video.